Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Women and Identity Conversations in Midlife. So, this episode is about finding your way back to yourself. And for those of you who are new, I'm Alana Jean Tejas. I'm an educator, a writer, and the founder of Worthy and Wild. It's a community for women who are learning to connect with themselves, lead with intention, and create a future they can't wait to live. And I see a bunch of familiar names on here. Thank you guys for joining. This is exciting. I started the Women on Identity series because I believed there is incredible power in honest conversations. And when one woman shares her story, another woman often finds a piece of her own. And so my hope is that these conversations remind all of us that we're not alone, for one, and that it's never too late to come home to ourselves. And so the series is really about the conversations that we don't have enough, I feel. The ones about identity, purpose, change, and what happens when the roles we have held for years, they begin to shift. So, one of the things that I've loved most is realizing that while every woman's story is different, so many of us have, um, there's a common thread, right? And that we're asking the same questions. And this is with my friends, this is with people on Substack. It's like, who am I now? What do I want next? And how do I find my way back to myself? And so tonight's guest is someone who has lived an extraordinary life. But what strikes me most isn't the travel or the adventure. It's how intentionally she's choosing the next chapter. And so Jen is the founder of WOW, Women of the Wild. I love that. She's a writer, a lifelong adventurer, and a mom of 4 boys who has spent, I think you said 4, right?
Yeah.
Um, who has spent years homeschooling, traveling the world, and building a life rooted in curiosity and courage. And now she's helping other women remember that adventure isn't something reserved for our younger years. It's something that can call us home to ourselves. And as a backpacker and hiker, I mean, I haven't traveled the world like you have, but I can totally relate to that adventure piece. So, Jen, I thank you for being here. I really do. And so I would love for everyone to get to know you. So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, what Women of the Wild is all about, and then just what brought you to Substack.
Great. Hi. Thank you for having me. Really thankful to be here. And so I'm Jen Smith. I grew up in Quebec, in the French part of Canada. I'm the youngest of 3 girls and went on to have 4 boys. I met my husband backpacking in Nepal when I was 24.
Wow.
We met on a flight from Bangkok to Kathmandu, and I think this is a funny part of our story because back in those days there was only two flew Bangkok Kathmandu, and one was Thailand Airways, and it was twice the price, and we both chose the Biman Bangladesh flight because it was only $70, and it had a stopover in Dhaka, and we both thought, we'll see a new country. And anyway, we were the only young backpackers who were non-Bangladeshi on that flight, and so we quickly found each other. And yeah, we went on to do business school in Australia and founded our first company together in 2004. We had 4 little boys really quickly in 4 years. Jake
Wow.
was 4, Luke was 2, and we found out we were having twins, which I know you can
Great.
relate to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess it was an adventure, right from the start. Um, we ended up living in Silicon Valley in California for about 10 years. When our oldest was about to turn 13 and starting middle school, we kind of looked at each other and, you know, back when we were um, backpacking through Southeast Asia, we said to each other, even at that young age, like if we have kids and we can raise them in, this part of the world for at least a part of their life, like what a gift that would be. And so we were right around the stages of starting our third startup, and my husband and I looked at each other and we said, if we don't do it now, we're not going to do it. And in 5 weeks, we burnt the boats. Like we sold everything, cars, houses, put our third startup on the shelf, and basically said, let's go. And we went to Indonesia and we moved to Bali, and
Wow.
it kind of all, spiral, kind of built on that. The boys did a year at international school. I ended up working there for a year so we could afford it. Following year, they were all just incredible little surfers, and they started to get sponsored, and they were like, Mom, can you homeschool us? And I'm like, wait, what? Like, we're like tech entrepreneurs, like that's for weirdos, kidding around. And that was before COVID, right? And I was like, you know
Yeah.
what, I'm always up for an adventure. And I basically looked at them in the eye and said, you know what, we'll try it for 6 months, but we're going to do it kind of shoulder to shoulder. And I don't expect you guys to know what you're doing, don't expect me to know what I'm doing, and like, let's kind of figure it out together. And we did. And we were kind of 8 months into it, and COVID hit. And
Mm.
all of a sudden this flood of resources came, and we were already in it, and we were already doing it, and
Yeah.
it was working for us. And anyway, long story short, 8 years later, the older two boys are going off to university. And yeah, so I guess the catalyst really for wow is something I was dreaming about forever. But running my family, and the boys are professional surfers and kind of running their surf careers, and I was always pouring into everyone. And
Yeah.
but I was also kind of able to kind of see like 3 steps ahead, and say like, gosh, these guys are all going to be gone in a couple of years. And because they're
Right.
all so close in age, I was like, they're all going to be gone really quickly at the same time, and
Mhm.
I was kind of saying, like, it's time for me to start something so that I'm not going to get lost in the shuffle of everybody leaving,
Right.
And so basically, about a year ago, I had a small bout of scare with cancer, which I'm all okay with, but that was kind of the step that I needed to take and say like, okay, I'm
Right.
gonna pause and start this.
Mhm. Wow. First of all, I'm glad you're okay. And that is like an amazing story. And you're right. Like, I think getting ahead of it is smart, right? Like, and I have friends who just boom, empty nesters. Now what? I like that you're like, okay, I'm thinking ahead. How, that our identities are so wrapped up when you are a mom and being a mom. So I love that. Um, One thing that really stood out to me while reading your answers was that you talked about reinventing yourself, but you didn't talk about it in that way. You talked about it in terms of remembering yourself. And so I think so many women believe that they have to become somebody completely different when life changes. And so when maybe that they're really doing what they're really doing is reconnecting with parts of themselves um, that got quiet, or, everything drowns out you sometimes when you're a busy mom or whatever you're doing, right? And so for years, you said your identity was deeply connected to raising your 4 boys. So as they begin creating lives of their own, like you said, what has this transition been like emotionally? Was there grief mixed with excitement? I mean, I think we can all relate to there's a slew of emotions, but what was that for you?
I think the thing that also, like I said earlier, was something that was helped me to define what wow was for me is we I had a medical journey with my father growing up, and then I had a medical journey with one of our sons. And I probably some a way that some of my best friends would describe me, and I'm like, that sounds weird and also like interesting. And so I kind of sat with that for a bit, and I said, well, what does that actually mean? And for me, a crisis, is something where, okay, you know exactly your goal. Like, you know what needs to get solved. All the little
Right.
things get stripped away. You know who your people are, and you know what you need to get done. Right? So, all the
Yeah.
detail of life, the little things don't matter. And you're just focused on the crisis. And I'm like, okay, but I don't want to live my life in a crisis. Like, right? I want to thrive. So, what does that where's the parallel in that? And I think the parallel is a challenge. And
Mhm.
so for me, when I look back at my life, the times where I've pushed myself through a challenge, and like a positive one and a negative one, what happens there is the same exact thing. So when I'm climbing a mountain, when I'm starting something new, when I'm trying something I haven't done before, right? It's a challenge, right? I have to kind of like search myself. I
Yeah.
have to find the will to take the next step. So I was like, gosh, if I created retreats where women could come together, right? They could depend on each other. They could have a goal,
Yeah.
like a challenge, that would create the environment where all the little things, right? Women, like, we're good at logistics, we're good at the detail, like we're good at running a family, we're good at
Yeah.
managing our careers, but it's in those details where we just get lost, right? You don't, you're like, who am I today, right? All I've done is
Yeah.
1,000 details and it doesn't feel like I've done anything, right?
Right.
And so I think for me, creating wow was that moment of like, I I know what my goal is. Like I know what my focus is. And I think that kind of helped me find myself again because I'm like, I'm in there. I'm under all those details. Like,
Mhm.
and I think when I started to do these retreats, I was like looking at other women going, oh my gosh, like you've forgotten who you are, you know? And that last
Mhm.
200 meters as you're pushing to the summit where you've got nothing left and you look to your left and you're like, come on, we got this together, right?
Mhm.
And all of a sudden you
Yeah.
have this renewed sense of energy and connection. And I think like I'm a super extrovert. I love people, you know, but I'm around my four boys and my husband 24/7, right?
Yeah.
But I don't, but I was missing a connection with, like, a deeper connection with other women, and I wasn't finding that in my the time in my life to be able to do that, and
Right.
or the time I wanted and needed to put into that in order to create those relationships. And I think when you put people in a crisis or you put people in a challenge, at the end of it, you're way more connected than you were had you had cocktails every Thursday for the last 6 years. You know what I mean? Like nothing's
Yeah.
wrong with that
Mhm.
either. But
Right.
if you put people in these forced environments where you have a
Mhm.
shared goal, you find that.
Yeah. I love that. And I love how you didn't wait for something to happen to you. Like you created that environment so that you could make that happen for yourself, which I think is really great. Like I think more of us need to do that. Um, that's really profound, I think. And I might have to like look into one of your trips. Like sounds
Yes,
cool.
please.
Um, you wrote about turning 50 while hiking in Nepal. Um, 25 years after first hiking it with your husband. Can you take us back to that moment? What did standing there teach you? What was that like?
You know, it was a dream. So when the boys, I would dream about adventuring with them, you know, and as you know, as have like you having four little guys, like every day was, you know, kind of an adventure, and there was not a day where we weren't hiking or biking or, I mean, just the
Mhm.
endless energy, right?
Yeah.
And as they developed more in their careers and they were focusing on surfing, you know, almost all of our adventures were finding big waves, and anywhere we went, you know, the surf had to be, it was always around surfing, and it was always around, you know, and I can surf and I'm a decent surfer, but I'm nothing like they are, you know, and it isn't my thriving place. Like it you know, it's hard. Like I have to push myself and I have to, you know, overcome a lot to be out there. um, but
Mhm.
Nepal was always something that deep in my soul, I was like, if I could do one more trip, like if I only had one to do with my kids, would be when I turned 50 in Nepal, because I turned 25 in Nepal. And randomly, as the world works, because of the war in Iran, we couldn't get from, so we spend the winters in Nazare, where the biggest wave in the world is for my older boys. And then we spend most of the summers in Indonesia. And so we were trying to get from Portugal to Indonesia, and we always fly through the Middle East. So this is like end of March. So we couldn't. There literally was no flights. And the direct flights from Europe to Indonesia were astronomical. And so we're kind of trying to find our way around the globe. Anyway, long story short, we ended up in Kuala Lumpur, and we couldn't get our Indonesian visas. They were going to take like another 20 days, and we're like, oh, I'm stuck in Malaysia, and we were. And at the last second, I look and there's a flight, like an $89 flight from Kuala Lumpur to Kathmandu. And my husband and I just look at each other and we're like, we found a storage unit, threw everything in it, grabbed some backpacks and some hiking boots, and we just went. And
Wow.
everything would be full. Like you couldn't even find a guide because it's like the time of year where everybody's there. And we get there, and within 2 or 3 days, I had found a guide. I had worked all our trekking permits out, and we set out. And you know what? Like, we're all fit and everything, but we hadn't trained for this. Like, we were going altitude. Like, the amount that
Mhm.
could, there was no other families doing this hike. It was a 14-day hike, the Manazulu circuit. We went up to almost, 16,000 feet.
Wow.
Anyway, we had a terrible weather, like 3 days of like 2 feet of snow. People were turning back, and we just were like, nah, 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 there's no turning back. People were like, well, what happens if one of the boys had altitude sickness? I'm like, we didn't have a plan B. We would figure it out when if someone got sick, we would pull straws and go back with that kid.
Yeah.
But we didn't. The day of the day we woke up at 3 in the morning, we drank our coffee and ate our oatmeal, and the weather cleared, and we had the most perfect summit
Wow.
or pass. And I stood there on that summit, and I just felt it in my soul, and just was like, this is what life is about. Just the moment of like all the years, right? All the
Yeah.
logistics, like all the pieces, and right. And I think at the end of the day, the mantra that I say to myself is like, if you just take the next step,
Mhm.
you'll know the next step. And
Yeah.
so it was incredible. It was exhilarating, and it was like the moment where I was like, I think I need to do a wow extreme. Like, I would love to do that with
Mhm.
women. Like, I think it would be, you would need to be the right women to do it,
Yeah.
but I think it would be incredible. And it just goes to show, like, you know what we can do when we put our mind to something.
Yeah. I have
Yeah.
not done anything to that scale, but I can relate in terms of, I did Mount Whitney with my son.
Oh, it's
So,
awesome.
I mean, there's a tiny piece of me that can relate, like, just like you said, I love that image because it wasn't about reaching the summit necessarily, right? It's almost like standing between, I feel like, two versions of your life, looking back with gratitude and then realizing there's still so much ahead. I don't know, it's just, I love that story. It just gives me goosebumps. Um, yeah, what an amazing, that is definitely, I would love to do that one day. Um,
I
but
highly recommend it. It's just,
yeah,
yeah.
so great. So, one of my favorite things that you wrote was adventure doesn't hand you a new self, it strips everything away so you can remember the one you already had. Can you kind of unpack that a little with us? Because I think so many women believe they're trying to find themselves when maybe they're really just trying to come home to themselves. So, if you could just expand on that a little more.
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind when I hear you say my words is, I've been like, as if you're a mom, right, you're so embedded in your life with your kids, and it's really like, for me, it was the greatest gift, and I would do it all over a million times. Um, but I think the moments that stand out for me are when I am by myself, when I'm at the grocery store or something, and someone's like, "Oh, how are you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we're good." And then I'm like, "Oh, I'm by myself right here," and they're just gonna look at me like, and I'm like,
Yeah.
they are so much a part of my identity. And I remember the other day I was talking to someone, and my oldest son was and they were asking me how it was doing, and all my later my oldest son said, "Mom, like, every story you tell is about us." you know and
Mhm.
they're like, "You don't have to share that or this or that," and
Yeah.
it's interesting, and they don't mean it in a mean way, but I'm
Right.
like, gosh, like, so much of who I am is wrapped up in, so much of my identity is wrapped up in being their mom, and I love that, but I also feel a bit lost in that. And I I think it's it's really a balancing act between trying to find, like I'm like, like I don't want the narrative to be like, oh, mom needs me time, mom needs this, and it isn't
Right.
about that,
Yeah.
but when they saw me building WoW, and they watch me connect, and they watch me talk to other women, and they watch me, it sounds silly, but come alive, like in my own, because they saw me for so many years watching them and being on
Yeah.
the sidelines and cheering and supporting and all of those things,
Right.
and I couldn't be prouder of them. But it's really interesting now to watch them be proud of me, and
Yeah.
not in a way that I need it, but in a way that just makes me smile, And I think that them being able to now kind of rediscover who I am, and kind of see the moments that light me up, and kind of watch me, grow into,
Right.
like you said, like we do, who knows, I just turned 50, like I could have 40 more years, right? Which is kind of wild to think about,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
like, and so I think it's that, I think it's me kind of seeing a reflection of myself in their eyes, and being, or connecting with other women and going like, oh, you like that, and kind of just remembering the moments, because I
Hmm.
think for so many years we lived through the joy of our kids, which
Yeah.
isn't a bad, it's not a bad thing, of course, right? I mean, it's
Right.
kind of who we are, like who we're made to be, that is what they needed, that is who we wanted to be for them. But you
Yeah.
can kind of see as they're stepping away, for me, as my kids are growing up and stepping away, like, right, if you're a good mom, your kids are thriving, right? Like
Yeah.
they're meant to leave, which is,
Right.
in some ways, feels so, I'm grieving that already, but I also
Mhm.
recognize that I'm super grateful for that.
Yeah.
But once they are gone, like, you know like I don't want to be the person sitting on the couch going like, what now,
Right.
like, and I'm slowly discovering that already, like, and just going like, okay, this is
Hmm.
pretty awesome, like I love that my kids are proud of me, like I love that they're a part of it, I love that they're
Yeah.
talking about the things that I'm doing, and they want to see me come alive. And so I think it's, when I share stories of when I was like 20, 22, 23, 24, I see them now at those ages, like they're almost at those ages, they're able to kind of look at me and go like, I wish I'd known you then, mom, and I'm like, and so that those are
Yeah.
so anyway, all I'm trying to say right now is basically like, we're not reinventing someone, we're not becoming something else, we're just now stripping down the layers of that we've had to build over the years, like, oh, okay, right, as a mom, you're like, oh, now I am a middle school, uh, I don't know, hat. Now
Yeah.
you've kind of put on, it's almost like we've put on armor, like we've put on layers and layers of whoever
Yeah.
that we've needed to be over the years. And now
Hmm.
we're like, oh, I don't need to be the middle school driver. They need to be this person. Like, let me throw off all these layers. And then I'm like, oh, right. I am
There she
still like,
is.
yeah, there she is. Yeah. And I think that's what's important, like, I think
Yeah.
that's what's so fun, right? You know?
Hmm. Yeah, that really resonates with me too. I mean, I am a true empty nester. Um, my youngest, like I was sharing with you before we got on, my oldest is 40, my youngest is 20, almost 25. And yeah, so that really does resonate. It is a shedding of all these layers that we've built. And I do think we spend all those years becoming everything everyone needs, adding that, like you said, and then one day we're like, I look at it like we haven't disappeared, like you said. It's more of we've just been busy,
We've kind of been buried.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think I love that. Um, you also said, and I think it's trying to figure out how, like a lot of us don't know how to do that. And I think that's what's cool about like your story is you're learning to do that, I think, and not waiting, which I love. So many just kind of get blindsided by whatever that identity shift is, right? And not knowing how to peel those layers off. So I love your story for that. You also said that you're no longer willing to play small. So, what does playing small actually look like to you, and how did you know you were doing that?
I think I think it's just along the same thread, you know?
Mhm.
Like if when especially when, let's just say, like, my I've definitely been someone, and I think people in my life have been, oh, are you like, you're, every vacation is you guys are surfing, or you guys are here, like, what is it you want to do, and how come you don't go on, this retreat and doing that, and I think it's not that I would look back and say I regret anything, or but I do think, for me in particular, um, I think that playing small was kind of like, I would put myself on the back burner because I was really just happy to kind of be whoever I needed to be. And not to keep the peace. Like, I don't feel any remorse or regret, but
Right.
I'm also feeling um, like life's too short and it's time to live. And I think a lot of women like live in fear. And I think
Yeah.
social media, I think the last couple of years post COVID, I think people have really changed. Like, the
Yeah.
more I talk about it with people, the more it feels like, even my kids are feeling it. They're like, people just seem different. People are just scared. Like, it doesn't feel like we're not grounded in our systems anymore. Like, our systems don't necessarily feel real, like
Yeah.
our governments, like, maybe we have too much information, maybe we don't have enough, I don't know. But I just feel like the fear is gripping everybody. And
Mhm.
I just and I'm just like, I'm not willing to put up with it. Like, I'm just like,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we can live within limits, but we can also choose to take, like, I'm going to keep going back to that, but like, take the step towards growth and towards healing and
Right.
towards back to ourselves. So I just, like, I'm not willing to live in a fear box. Like, I'm just,
Yeah.
I balance my faith with my, like, I have really strong faith, and I just trust, and
Yeah.
I don't I'll have all the answers, like, of where things are going, but I trust myself, I trust my skill set, I trust
Yeah.
that God's got a plan, and I trust that, like, if it's in front of me, it's, I'm willing to take a step towards it.
Yeah. I also think, yes, I agree, like, fear can play a big part, and I also think sometimes it's just out of habit, right? That
Yeah.
I don't know, I think fear can be a habit too as well, right? We're just so used to living a certain way or doing things a certain way or believing something has to be a certain way. So I love that. I think that's a different take than I've heard before with that playing small, right? Um, and just, not making ourselves fit around a certain need or a certain expectation, right? Whether it's society or whatever it is. So I really appreciate that viewpoint. WOW is such a beautiful community. Um, at what point did you realize this wasn't? And then Alicia, yeah, fully empower all radiance. I love it. She said, beautiful for your comments. Um, at what point did you realize this wasn't just your journey anymore, that other women were longing for this too?
I could just, my closest friends, like, I have, little pockets of community in California, in Portugal, and Indonesia. And, when I connect with my closest friends, like on the cliff in Nazare, when I'm watching my boys, and people are like, how do you stand here and watch them? And then, I start sharing, and
Mhm.
I think, uh, I think what was really, what I really was listening to women, I was like, gosh, like, women are back to that analogy, just kind of buried. Like they're not, you know, like when you, if you really sit there and listen to women, they want to be adventuring. Like they want to be, and I don't mean adventuring like every time climbing a mountain. That's not what I mean, but
Right.
more on like their own adventure, you know,
Mhm.
outside of their career, outside of their, you know, and I don't feel like women are giving themselves permission. And I
Yeah.
think there's threads in society, like we're either this way or this way. Like we're either a good mom or we're kind of out there doing something and we're not. And it's just like,
Mhm.
you know, I remember when my kids were really little and I was trying to run our first startup with my husband and kind of like home with the kids, but like, you know, I'd stick my infant like under the table in the lawyer meeting and, you know, just totally juggling, trying to like
Yeah.
have, you know, do accounting and the finance kind of at night and behind the scenes, but then be fully present during the day, like all of us, right? Juggling it all. And then I had other
Yeah.
friends who were like stay at home mom full time, and other friends who were like full time working and had a nanny. And we'd all sit down and have a glass of wine and a bunch of chocolate cake, and everyone would just be like deflated. And I'd be like, guys, like, let's just own our guilt. Like, you're going to
Yeah.
have it in some area of life, but
Mhm.
like, we just have to like let it go. Like, you
Yeah.
know, and we need to be able to just lean on each other, whether, you know, it's like whatever guilt you're holding. Okay. So that was kind of like those early years. And
Yeah.
now our kids are growing up and we're kind of looking at each other going like, you know, so when I really listen to women, like women are just kind of like, I want to play
Mhm.
right to start, you know?
Yeah.
and and my husband laughs because I can be, you know, I can play like and be really childlike really quickly with like kids around. But the minute the kids aren't there, I'm like, what should I do? You know? And so if you really sit and listen to a group of women, like I've had a lot of Zoom calls with women as we prepare for our retreats, and it's, you know, I can just hear within their questions, you know, like, well, what do we do then? You know, and you know, and it's really
Yeah.
sweet, right? It's kind of like it's kind of childlike again because it's
Yeah.
really like a self discovery.
Mhm.
And it's like, am I going to be allowed to do that? Do I have permission to do that?
Yeah.
Um, and I think it I love it, to be honest. Like I just think it's really
Yeah.
fun, you know. And I'm like,
Mhm.
so the biggest thing I say to women is like, okay, when you land at the airport, I'll be there. And guess what? You don't have to worry about anything else. Like
Yeah.
it's all going to be taken care of for you, right? And it's
Mhm.
almost like this permission to be like, wait, you've got this? And I'm like, I've got you, you know? And then I
Yeah.
had one woman who's like, well, I really want to I have a retreat in the fall that's, we summit a volcano. We sleep in tents for 2 nights on it. And she's like, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do the summit. And I was like, it's okay because we each have our own female guide. And I said, you know what? You can get to the crater, which has the lake, and the summit's like another 2, 3 hours, right? But if you want to stay at the crater and swim in the hot springs and hang out with your guide, and I said, guess what? You have permission to just stay there. And
Mhm.
and it's interesting because if you give people the language of like you've got permission, they're like, oh,
Right.
I can. Whereas they wouldn't choose to, okay, I'm generalizing in the moment, but most women wouldn't say they can't come and make it up an excuse,
Right.
or they wouldn't allow themselves the permission to just be like, hey, this lake looks fun. I'm not going to summit, you know? And so
Mhm.
if I give them the permission to say like, hey, on that day, you get to choose.
Yeah.
And and you know there's going to be a couple of women around you who might take your hand and say like I think you got this.
Right.
And there also might be a few women who are like, you know what, I'm going to stay here too. And I
Yeah.
think our lives as moms and career builders and women, I think, you know, we don't feel permission to choose a lot of the time, and we put our own needs and challenges and all that aside, and it's not necessarily
Yeah.
um, but it's not necessarily because we are like, oh, I've got to do this, you know. It's like you're happy to
Yeah.
do that for your kid, right? So
Right.
I'm not saying it in a begrudgingly way. I'm saying in
Right.
like, I've put myself aside, I've put my needs aside, and that's okay. Like
Yeah.
there was a time and a place for that. And
Right.
now as I watch my kids take flight or as I watch my career change or whatever, I'm also giving myself permission to go like, do I really want to summit, or do I just want to sit in the hot springs? And
Right.
it's really cool to empower women to be able to make those, even though they seem kind of little and not important. They're really big
Yeah.
decisions, and I think it's
I
really
agree.
amazing to kind of put women in, you know, like there's guardrails, right?
Yeah.
They're not just out there on their own or whatever. Like I'm there and I'm guiding and I'm around, but I'm also giving like little opportunities throughout the 8 days where you get to choose. You get to kind of sit there and go, do I want to go on a snorkel, a kayak, or do I just kind of want to sit here and
Yeah.
drink my coffee? And
Yeah.
those are the moments where I've created the whole are the whole reason why WoW exists, because
Yeah.
I want those moments, and the people I'm closest to over the years I could watch them find those moments. And so now, more and more women are being able to, and I think once you go home you're changed, right? You
Yeah.
remember those moments, like they stick with you.
Mhm. Yeah. I I think that's one of the gifts of midlife too, is telling the truth, and to what you're saying, right? Being honest with what we're feeling, and think, because we lose, I think sometimes we forget what that's like what you're saying, like, what do I want? You're giving women a space to actually have time and capacity to really like hone in on that. And it gives someone else, like you said, permission to tell their truth, right? What am I feeling or thinking? What do I want to do? I think it's great. um, One thing I noticed throughout your answers in is that on the series is that adventure seems to be less about travel and more about trust. And you touched on this just in the last question, but would you say that's true? Um, or is it something different?
No, I think it's 100% about trust. Like I think it's adventures about trusting you. And I think taking the next step is you trusting that you're going to make it and that you've got what it takes. And I think it's all about trust. And I think what adventure does kind
Yeah.
of turn back inward and find the strength, right? Like so
Yeah.
let's just go back to that moment where you're sitting on the crater and you have to get up at 3 a.m. and drink a coffee and eat a fried banana and look at the other woman and go like, am I putting on this headlight in the pitch black and I'm going to do this, right? And it's like, do you grab hold of the woman's hand next to you and you're like, okay, we're doing this, like that's trust, right? Or that we've got each other. And it's a
Mhm.
trust. And I think it comes back to that moment of like all those little things are stripped away and you really have to kind of look
Yeah.
inward and go like, I've got this. And
Yeah.
I think that trust comes in making that first decision of going like, I'm going to book this trip, like I'm going to do this for myself. And that you also have to just trust that you're gonna, make the time, you're gonna train for it, you're
Mhm.
gonna put your other responsibilities aside. Like there's trust in every single step.
Yeah,
um, but I
definitely.
think ultimately where the trust, the biggest trust lies is that you're like, I am gonna strip these layers back and really
Mhm.
find find me, and
Yeah.
then bring that feeling back into life, and then continue to trust that you will take the step back to yourself.
Right. Yeah. And not everyone listening is gonna hike through Nepal, right?
That's right.
But every woman is gonna face moments, like you said, where she has to choose between staying comfortable, or just saying yes to something that stretches her. And yeah, I mean, you nailed it. I think um, everybody's got a different adventure, which I love. And for me, that's what hiking and backpacking does for me as well. Like, it just stretches me. It forces me to think deeper, to trust myself, right? Exactly the things you're mentioning. I can totally relate to that.
Yeah, and I think I think so. What I also have done now, I've only done it twice now, but like I've other friends of friends have reached out and had said like, okay, like I don't want to hike in Nepal, or I'm not going to physically be able to do that or whatever, or hike a volcano or whatever. But like, how do I find a challenge that suits me?
Right.
And so I've had these conversations with women who are like, oh, I'm turning 50 or I'm turning 55, or I have a career milestone, or I've just launched this or whatever. And so I've sat down with them and we kind of unpack like what could be a challenge for you, because a challenge can be so many things, right? And so then I've started curating these trips for women, and it's been really fun, to kind of go like, okay, what in your life, like kind of unpacking things like what did you do when you were 20,
Mhm.
and what is if you had to pick one trip, and then you kind of talk
Right.
like that, and
Yeah.
then now I'm building a surf trip, which is also going to challenge me too, and so it's
Yeah.
it's
That
and
sounds
it's kind
cool.
yeah, it's kind of fun, and it's fun to unpack like what a challenge could be, and I think it's different for all of us, and so I think but ultimately at the end of the day, it's stripping back those layers, and it's really kind of honing
Yeah.
in on honing on just kind of what cracks you open, like
Yeah.
what's gonna make you feel alive, like what's gonna bring you back to that 6 year old
Hmm.
little girl, or who's got a smile from ear to ear.
Yeah. Exactly. I love that. So you said something in your answers that I highlighted immediately. And you wrote, "The woman you're trying to find isn't gone." And I know we have touched on this a little bit throughout the live tonight. But why do you think so many women, and we did touch on this a little bit, but just kind of expand on it. Why do you think so
Sure.
many women believe, or maybe don't believe, that they do think that woman is gone? Like, how why is that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like if we're honest with ourselves, and we kind of see the different social. I don't know if you've probably seen them too, but like people are like, find a photo of yourself when you're 6 and put it on your mirror, right, and talk to
Mhm.
her, like and it
Yeah,
kind of makes you giggle, but you're like, what? Okay, where's the truth that's lying in all of that? And I
right.
think I think like you said, like we have touched on it a little bit, and I think is all the masks and all the identity and all the hats that we've put on over the years just kind of buried that person, and she's undefined, or we're unable to find her again. And I think I think there's a lot of layers, and
Yeah,
I think loss and grief and life kind of has shaped us all, but I really do
mhm,
think she's in there. Like I think if you really kind of sit down and have a conversation with someone, and they're able to kind of really help you get to a place where you're like, you know what, where I think that at the end of the day, the word joy is the one
mhm,
I lean on the most, because when the word joy is kind of twofold, right? Like it's not happy. Like happy is,
right,
you just got, I don't know, you won the lottery, you're happy, Whereas
mhm,
joy, I think, is deep. And
yeah,
you could have joy in the middle of grief. You could still find joy in sadness and in pain and stuff, And I think if you look back on your life and you find where does all that joy in your life
mhm,
sit, I think you'll find that that little girl like deep inside you, and or
yeah,
that and so I think ultimately at the end of the day, like I think we're scared to kind of go back, perhaps, and peel the onion and all the layers, um,
mhm,
because maybe we feel like we're not deserving of it.
yeah.
Um,
I'm taking
and
notes while you're talking. I'm like, "Okay, I might have another article here."
yeah, oh,
Um,
good.
yeah, no, but that really, like, struck a chord with me, and I'm actually visualizing a picture of myself, that I have, that I've never really thought about it like that, and I think, and as you were talking, I was kind of thinking, like, I think one of the biggest lies we tell ourselves, especially in midlife, is that somehow we've missed our chance. So maybe that's part of it, right? We think we're just, I don't know if we think we're done or we just think it's too late. I don't know, but getting past that, right?
Yep.
I don't, yeah, just really being able to say, what do I want, and giving myself permission, right? To do
Exactly.
that thing. Or yeah, I love that. Um so I ask everybody something similar for the last question. So as you look back over everything you've lived, and you have had an amazing life, what do you know now that you wish every woman understood earlier?
I think that we've got what it takes, you know, that we
Mhm.
are prepared, and we are like, we can trust ourselves. And if I think a really amazing way to look at it, whether you have faith or not, if you look at life through the rearview mirror, you
Yeah,
can see you can see all the moments. You know, you can see all the really hard things, and you can see all the really good things.
yeah,
And you can sit there and in the moment recognize that you're like, but I'm here and it all worked out, and it's going to continue to work out, right? Even the forks in the road, and even the two paths that diverged, you know, in the yellow wood,
mhm,
and which one am I going to take, you know? Like,
right,
when you look in the rearview mirror, you see that you can trust yourself, and you've worked, you know, you've gotten through each moment, and will
yeah,
continue to get through each moment. And I think sometimes, you know, whether we're going through menopause or different things, you know, like, I think the fear sometimes gets really overwhelming, and
yeah,
sometimes it's a lot easier to just stay safe and stay small, right?
yeah,
But I think if we, like, take a deep breath and we look back, I think it can empower us to take the step forward. And I think it's the most incredible way to look at your life, is through looking at what you've accomplished and being able to kind of look back and go like, hey, like, I've got what it takes.
mhm,
And
yeah,
to just like I said, to just trust yourself, and to just take say yes
yeah,
and take that first
yeah,
step. Yeah.
yeah. I love that. I love that. Jen, thank you. Thank you so much. It took a little while to get us together, but I'm
Yeah.
so glad that we were able to do this. I really do thank you for your honesty and your wisdom, and for reminding us that the next chapter doesn't have to be, it's not smaller, it's just different, right? And
Right.
I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is that we don't need to become somebody new, that we're in there. We just need to give ourselves, like you said, permission to return to the woman who has been there this whole time. And maybe that's what I feel like the season is really all about. Like you said, it's not reinvention, it's just remembering, right? Remember that
Yeah,
little girl? Yeah.
and just just the grace to kind of, like, almost blossom again, right?
Mhm.
The grace to give ourselves the time to kind of find the sunlight, and kind of, you know,
Yeah.
let ourselves grow, you know, and yeah, and see it as exciting.
Yeah, for sure. And I've heard this often in the lives I've done, is what makes you come alive? What sparks joy, like you said, like all those pieces. Um, and so I do want to thank everybody. I just feel like there's always such a great turnout. Thank you everybody for joining. I wanted to let everybody know, if Jen's story resonated with you, I hope you'll connect with her and follow her work on Women of the Wild. Her link will be in the replay. Please subscribe to her. Check out. I'm seriously going to check out your trips that you do. I think that's so great. And I'd love for you also, for you guys to, if you're new to Worthy and Wild, I'd love for you to join our community as well, as we continue these conversations about identity and health and self leadership, and just creating a future that we can't wait to live, like Jen said. So until next time, be present, stay curious, and lead with gratitude. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you,
Thank you.
Jen. It was
Thank
Nice to
you.
meet you in person.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah, have
Thank
a
you for
great
having me.
night. Thank you so
Okay.
much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care.